The moral of the story is these Chinese grandparents in communist China, okay, they were the OG savages. Actually, we were talking about this as well during one of the dinners over hot pot. Like my grandparents were the phrase that I used was that they understood life basically the most out of everyone. I was saying this to my younger aunt and uncle, that the more time comes to pass, like in light of all recent events with my dad's sudden passing, and even just in general as I move through my life, as I get older, as I move into deeper into my 30s and think about the prospect of the rest of my life, right? Like, how far am I going to get to? 40s, 50s, 60s? Is there even going to be 70s and 80s for me? I would have thought, like, when I was a kid, I thought for sure that by the time I was an adult, we would have had this human life expectancy thing figured out. I thought for sure human life expectancy average would go way up. Apparently, that's not the case. Like, people are dropping left and right like flies. COVID certainly did not help in that process, but even without COVID, like, people are sicker than ever these days, it seems. Stress is a huge killer, you know? But yeah, so I was just talking about how, at the end of the day, I always go back to the conclusion that my grandparents were truly the most savage. And then my aunt told me something, either my aunt or my uncle. They said that my grandpa, who lived until 91, they were talking about how my grandpa was so markedly different in the way that he preserved his health as compared to my dad's generation. And I vaguely remember this too. I remember my grandpa was very, very, like, he would be that old man reading the newspaper every morning about, like, he would be the first person to catch the news about the new study coming out that bananas cause cancer or something. Like, he would be the first person on the front lines to catch that bit of news in the days before social media, right? Because now we have everything fed to us within seconds of it happening. But back in the day, my grandpa was the first to know. And he would tell everyone, he would sound the alarm for everyone, right? Like, okay, now we got to get rid of all the bananas in the house because apparently they cause cancer. My grandpa would wake up the same time every day, go to sleep exactly the same time every day. If he felt even slightly different today than he felt yesterday, then he would rush to the hospital, to the doctor to get himself checked out. That was the kind of person that my grandpa was. My grandma, not so much. I don't think my grandma was that fixated on like doctors and hospitals and stuff as my grandpa was, but she also lived a decently long life. I don't think my grandma made it to 90. Oh, she might have actually. She might have gotten pretty close. I think 88. But my grandpa was 91. At the time, he was the oldest. He was the sibling in his generation who lived the longest at that time. Now I believe it's been surpassed by my third grandpa. So my grandpa is the oldest of 8 boys. I know, can you imagine? And then the third grandpa, which is the third oldest of that generation, he is now sorry. That grandpa is now 95. I met him once a couple years ago when I was in my mid 20s, and he is a very, very positive man. Like, very, very positive, very motivational, especially if you consider some of the effed up crap that he went through in his life, again in communist China, okay. The way that that man just like gets up and celebrates life, enjoys life, is grateful for everything every day is something to behold for sure. Even my dad commented on that because apparently, like, he lost a kid before. I don't know if it was an infant or a young child, but he had to live through that nightmare that every parent hopes that they never have to endure, right? He lost one of his children somehow, and yet he's still able to bounce back from that. And I remember my dad telling me the story and saying that, you know what, I don't think I could do that. I don't think I would have the ability as him to be happy after all of the things that he went through in his life, especially losing a child. So I was like, wow, because like I thought my dad was invincible. I thought the things that my dad went through in his life were pretty hard, but in comparison, you know, everything's relative. I think that grandpa also, the one that's 95 now, and he was climbing mountains and stuff still, like when I met him 10 years ago. So he was in his mid 80s. That's still pretty up there, right? And yet he was like super fit, climbing mountains, very energetic, gave us a motivational speech on the taxi to our house. I think, yeah, he was a political prisoner or something of the sort for 7 years as well. Like brutal stuff. You guys do not want to know. During the Cultural Revolution. I kind of want to know. Like, my dad told me tidbits here and there, but I kind of would like to know more about the detailed history of my family. Like, especially the things we had to do to survive that period of the Cultural Revolution, or like how our family fit into that whole system. Because we were the Ren family, right? My last name is Ren, was branded as counter revolutionaries. And so, I mean, according to my dad, they were basically blacklisted from all the jobs at the time that everyone was trying to get their hands on, which would be in connection to the Communist Party. But anyway, sorry, just to finish the story about my grandpa. After hearing the stories from my aunt and uncle about how my grandpa was like very, very meticulous, very Spartan about his health, keeping a consistent schedule and routine every single day. I mean, I knew this growing up, but I guess it wasn't like I never really thought about it that way because to me that was just the way that grandpa was. But after hearing my aunt and uncle say it out loud, it made me realize that, oh, okay, so no wonder he was able to live longer than everyone else in his family at the time. Because my dad was 67 when he passed away. That's a far cry from the 91 years that my grandpa managed on this earth. And it doesn't sound right? Because the younger generation is supposed to outlive the older generation. This is kind of just the logic that we all come to the conclusion of. It just seems wrong that the older generation somehow was able to outlive the younger descendants, despite them not having all of the technological and medical advancements that we have at our disposal these days. Like my grandpa, even, he got stomach cancer as well. And by that point, it was really just attributed to old age, like the ailments that he was getting. But still, he was a trooper throughout it all. Like he got surgery 2 times, not even just once. He got surgery 2 times. He beat cancer twice, basically, and then still managed to hang on for a couple more years. And then apparently, so this was like news to me. This was the first time I ever heard this, but according to my aunt and uncle, my grandpa called it all the way back then. From his mouth, apparently, he said that none of my 4 sons are going to live as long as me. He was like, I know that like my level of meticulousness, my level of care that I take to preserve myself, I know that my 4 sons, they're not taking self-preservation seriously to that degree that I do every day. And therefore, none of my 4 sons are going to live as long as I do. And I was like, damn, Grandpa, well, you didn't have to like curse me like that, okay? You could have just, I don't know, you could have said that ain't a better way to, you didn't have to like curse me and basically speak into existence the early death of my dad. I'm kidding, obviously, but look at how the prophet's words have come true. So I say all that to say that, yes, my grandpa and grandma were the real OG. You can even call them the last true savages. I mean, like, that's not true though, because I'm a savage. But I was also born into the year of the snake, so I'm automatically more predisposed to be a savage. But maybe it skips generations. No, actually, what am I saying? I need to give my dad a lot of credit as well. I think my dad was definitely savage in his own way as well, except towards his own self-preservation. That is the kicker. Okay, that's the one area where, I mean, look at what happened. He neglected his own health. And not saying that everything was 100% his fault. Like maybe some of it had to do with, I don't know, hereditary stuff, and also the fact that he got COVID at the same time as he got lung cancer. Like both of those together, it was a double whammy. But at the end of the day, right, I'm not blaming my dad or anything, but at the end of the day, if you look back, like there were definitely a lot more preventative steps that he could have taken, but he chose not to because he was always the type of person that like he would never take it seriously, his own health, as much as he took seriously taking care of other people or making sure that other people were okay before he was. And so I feel like that particular thread of savage, maybe it might have skipped a generation, but now it's like resuscitated within the likes of me. Okay, I'm not going to make any bold claims that, oh, I'm going to be the first person in my family to live to 100 years old or something, but I mean, I don't even know if I want that. 100 would be nice, but self-preservation though, it's not just to do with your life expectancy, right? It's in all areas. It's also making sure that you don't get got. Like I'm the one that gets people, like I'm the one that's going to I'm not the one. I'm not the one to try. Because if you try it with me, I'm going to flip the script on you. Is basically the savagery that I was imbued with. That I feel like my dad got maybe a smaller dose of that in his genetic makeup, which led to him like sometimes being taken advantage of by people or being sucked dry sometimes by people. Not that my dad was a total doormat or anything, like he definitely had the ability to tell people to F off from time to time. But on the whole though, if you compare my dad and me, like my dad was definitely much more giving, like much more. And my dad's reasoning for this is that, you know, a lot of people, I guess, helped him along the way in his formative years. Like, I don't know the exact details, but like I said, the Ren family was branded a counter-revolutionary family during the Cultural Revolution, which made it difficult for my dad and his brothers to find employment or like to basically, I don't know, survive. However, they were blessed with the stroke of luck that everyone was pretty smart, with my dad being the smartest. Like my dad was always number one in his class, valedictorian, without even having to try that hard. My dad scored higher than even his older brothers on the school tests and everything. I feel like that was kind of like the one gift from God that our family got. But not only that, like being smart alone is not enough, right? You still need a lot of luck. And so when my dad was sent to like I forget the name, but they would send like boys down to the countryside to make them work for the regime, basically. Yeah, down to the countryside movement. Sorry, we're just gonna read a little bit of this. So the up to the mountains and down to the countryside movement, often known simply as the down to the countryside movement, was a policy instituted in the People's Republic of China between the mid 1950s and 1978. My dad was born in 1956, right smack in the middle. Blah, 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 blah. Chairman Mao declared certain privileged urban youth, is that what my dad would be? I don't think he was privileged, but they would be sent to the mountainous areas or farming villages to learn from the workers and farmers there. In total, approximately 17 million youth were sent to the rural areas as a result of the movement. Usually only the oldest child had to go, but the younger siblings could also volunteer to go instead. So basically, yeah, like free child labor. So my dad was sent to the countryside to do this for 3 years. And this, when we say countryside, we were talking about like in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. There is no heating or like minimal electricity. If it's winter, it's winter, like you're freezing, and you better go find a fur coat or something. Like you better figure out a way to survive. So my dad did that for 3 years. My oldest uncle, my dad's oldest brother, did that for 10 years. 10 years of his life. The best, most valuable years of their lives as young men in their early 20s. This is part of the reason why my parents got their PhDs so late, like relatively late in the game. My parents were in their 40s, I think just entering, like early 40s when they finally got their PhDs. Which, I mean, obviously you can get your PhD, you can get your GED, any degree at any age, but we're talking about, in the case of my parents, people who have placed their academic career at the forefront of their academics was their strategy for their way out of China, like how to build a life for themselves all along. So it's not like they took breaks or anything if they could help it, right? Like they followed the traditional order of, okay, high school, college, grad school, PhD, which I feel like for most people, if they went that track without taking a break, it would not take them until their early 40s to finish that. Hello, unrelated, but I decided to buy the Rare Beauty Grateful Shade because of your review. Hi, Missy Nyanko. Thank you so much. Thanks for watching. I'm glad that my review helped you. Yeah, I'm obsessed with Rare Beauty. I just wish they had it in Japan. I'm not holding out hope, though. I don't think they'll come here. Well, never say never, but I just don't think that they have that big of a audience here. But yeah, damn, Grandpa, you didn't have to curse me like that. But no, my point is, like, I think the savage, okay, skip generations. Like, I think my grandparents were the most savage. My dad was savage in his own way, but, he had to be savage to survive, but then he also had help. Oh, okay, so yeah, the second part of the story, I think according to my dad, I don't know the exact details again, but after he was sent to the countryside to work, apparently, like, I don't know if it was somebody that he met in the countryside that saw potential in him, like, saw how smart my dad was, and either I don't know if he, like, directly paid for some sort of scholarship or some way for my dad to pursue higher education, but something of the sort happened, right? Where my dad ran into this person, like an older mentor type of person who was able to direct him and like open doors for him in pursuing further education, higher education, which not every person was afforded that opportunity, right? But of course, you have to be smart in the first place. And my dad was in order to be offered something like that. But then at the same time, you have to be lucky enough to meet someone that can pull strings for you. And so that's what happened in the case of my dad. And so I think because of that, my dad felt like, okay, yeah, like I am smart, but I'm also extremely lucky. And so because of that, my dad had this I guess he felt like it was his duty also to give back in any way. Like throughout his whole life, he felt like, okay, if I'm ever in an advantageous position or if I ever have the chance to help somebody who is maybe lower on the totem pole than me, or to give somebody else a chance that would not otherwise have that opportunity if they didn't run into me, then I'll do it for them as long as I have the capacity to do so. So I think that, like, those little strokes of luck, I guess you could call it, during my dad's formative years were a huge part of, they built the foundation of like his generosity, right? And I consider myself a generous person too, but not that generous. Okay. Like, I feel like I'm much more favor my grandparents in the sense that I definitely for 200% need to make sure that I am good first before I start to extend any type of help to other people. Like, no. Especially especially if I don't trust that you're not going to, like, if it's somebody that I don't know for a fact that I can trust this person to give their 100%, their all, then I would not see it as a good use of my time or my resources. Whereas my dad was more of the thought process that, well, you should give people at least one chance or you should give people the benefit of the doubt. But I'm more like, no, I don't give the benefit of the doubt. I sit back and I watch people's actions and I take whatever data is available to me and I will act according to the data that I see in front of me, like the cold hard facts, which I think is closer to my grandparents' brand of savage, which I quite like. Okay, so I think I'll leave this live here and I will talk about the dates in another one.